Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 24th episode of the Sport Limerick Soccer Podcast. We're down one man this evening, Noel, with Jason O'Connor. He said he's taking a week's hiatus for this week, and a night off for this week. He'll be sorely missed, as our viewers will attest to as well. But you're here to keep the show on the road, Noel.
It might be the public holiday that the government are granting the frontline workers after the COVID epidemic. Maybe today is Jason's public holiday.
Yeah, maybe there's a relation there. Maybe so. But I suppose on to business for ourselves, and to start off with the Treaty United men's team, like we always do. Noel, last week they earned a 0-0 draw against Cork City at the Markets Field. As it turned out, Noel, it would be fair to say that it probably wasn't the most significant result for Treaty that night, in that Wexford went and beat Athlone at Lissy Woolen. So even though, again, a draw against Cork, it wasn't the victory, but it was a good draw. And then, of course, Wexford winning, it was a good night for Treaty, as it turned out. Gained a point on Athlone as well. Yeah,
it turned out to be a great night overall. And look, the point in itself against Cork, I think, was going to make it a good night anyway, even if Athlone had beaten Wexford. But it was like the icing on the cake, the fact that Wexford turned over Athlone. So, a really good night for Treaty. Another typical performance of the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I suppose in the game we say, that the results are paramount, and certainly that's borne fruit. Not a whole lot of endeavour in the final third for Treaty. I thought Cork, they really dominated the game. They created a lot of chances, and they troubled both full-backs in the Treaty lineup, particularly Charlie Fleming again. I thought he had a tough enough night with Dylan McGlade, but unfortunately, from a Cork point of view, there wasn't any end product in the final third, where they did have a couple of really good chances. They probably needed to score, maybe tempt Treaty out a little bit, and it might have been a better game. But the longer it went on, it suited Treaty down to the ground, and that's the way it has been. They've been quite defensive and solid, and prepared to defend the last 30 or 40 metres of the pitch and let the opposition come onto them. And that's the way it was. And as for as long as it stays 0-0, it's working very well for them. It's another point gained. They're obviously determined, and we're delighted about it, that they're in a playoff position, and they are going to hold on to that position now. It's only a matter of where they're going to finish. And I think it was fair to say, what we said last week about the kind of the wind being out of the Cork City sails after the defeat to Cork. I think it was, you could kind of see it. They were just not as sharp or not as bright as they had been the previous few weeks prior to the Shelbourne defeat. And you couldn't really grumble with the result. It probably wasn't a great spectacle to watch, but a great result, another point, and really cements Treaty's place in the playoff.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, Noel, it was quite obvious really that Treaty set up in a defensive manner. They would have been happy by the looks of it with the point from the outset in this game. On the biggest positive, I suppose, because there was a point there in the middle of the season, maybe coming towards the end of the last round of fixtures, where you were looking at Treaty and saying they're a bit more open than we were used to seeing them at the start for the first maybe 11 or 12 games. The best part of the recent run that they're on as such is the fact that they've kept a few clean sheets, and they look defensively solid, as you mentioned again.
Yeah, particularly against the calibre of opposition. You're talking about Galway and a resurging Cork, whatever about keeping a clean sheet against Cove. But certainly those ones are stand out. You see Galway scoring 4 goals against UCD last weekend, and before, up to a couple of weeks, so Cork were regularly putting 2 and 3 goals in against the opposition. Certainly I thought Callum McNamara was outstanding on Friday night. It was kind of surprising maybe that he hadn't played for a few weeks. I think he's been really, really good. A really good number 6, and once again the 2 Treaty centre halves, Anto O'Donnell and Mark Walsh. Particularly Mark Walsh, I think he's tackling, or his ability to dispossess in his own defensive area and all during the season has been outstanding. And they're a really good partnership, and they've really kind of gelled together, and they're typical of a good centre half partnership. If you look at them individually, people may say, they're not particularly great, but together they're certainly a fantastic unit. And that's always a hallmark of a good defensive team. Allied to that, then you have Ty Ryan again, who was obviously his confidence is sky high, with the amount of clean sheets that he's kept, the amount of outstanding saves he's made, the way he sweeps behind his two centre halves. He's really been excellent as well.
Yeah, it certainly has been. Ty Ryan has been in great form as of late. I mentioned this, Tommy, after the game, but it was a sour note, Noel, and it came the day after we were discussing team shape, tactics, and team news the night before the Cork game, 2 nights before the Cork game. But then we found out the day before the Cork game that Ed McCarthy had departed quite suddenly from the Treaty United squad and is now back with Regional United in the Limerick District Junior League. I have to say, speaking to people and on my own opinion, and I'm sure it's probably the opinion yourself, it was very disappointing news, considering Ed McCarthy had been involved in 22 out of 23 games, I believe, this season, and had been, very versatile, had been a key player for Tommy. As I mentioned to Tommy after the game, probably the flagship player when you look at the Treaty United motto, the young local talent coming through. So it would have been really disappointed for the club to lose him. Frustrating as well because of the fact that he was playing so well, Noel, for him to be dropping back down to junior football. Yeah,
I think it's hugely disappointing. There's no doubt about it. To be honest with you, I didn't know a lot about him, and I thought he was really, really good. He looked to me like a real talent. He had been moved around the pitch, and we were kind of giving out about it. But I thought that being a local player, and again, you're right about saying the treaty model, giving local guys a chance, getting them to play at the highest level. He was like the flagship of that whole model. The fact that it happened, really, really suddenly as well, because you're wondering, say, well, would you not stick it out now for the season, particularly that there's a playoff to come, which kind of is, for some guys, it may well be the highlight of their careers. Without delving into too much, because obviously it's his decision, and he's an amateur with Treaty, and there was mention about a job, and from having conversation with people I know myself, there certainly is, I'd have to say, plenty of jobs around for people if they want them at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of sections of industry that are crying out for people to go to work, and I do recall, and I had a conversation with a former Limerick manager as well about a player in my time when I was involved with Crew Park, and Limerick came calling, and Crew Park were determined to hold on to him, but he said it wasn't about money or anything else. He just wanted to play at the highest level. And unfortunately, it seems that it's not the same for Ed McCarthy, and playing at the highest level that he can isn't as important, to him. And that's the way it is. And hopefully that we won't have too many of those, because we certainly want guys from Limerick to play. Whoever club is the incumbent in the Airtricity League for the region, we certainly want all the players locally to aspire to play for that club.
Yeah, that is a huge point, because Tommy did mention, obviously, as you said, there is a link apparently there with the regional club and Ed in terms of the job. That seemed to be clear. Then you also had, we'll say, apparently regional before he'd even signed. There was an agreement there that he would return at some point. Now, Tommy, like you, thought he would end up finishing the season with Treaty at this stage. But there, I suppose it's disappointing to the fact that you would hope really that, that club players would be encouraged even at this point, just even to have finished out the season, we'll say, by a club that's courting him. And you'd hope that junior clubs in Limerick, that's probably the aim for Treaty, is that they buy in and run behind you, and you want to be representing your senior club, and you are encouraged to do that. And obviously, you don't want too many cases where this kind of situation is happening, even though we don't know the ins and outs of it.
No, we don't. But I suppose, the reality is that, and again, I would have had this in my own time in Limerick. The original model that I had was I was over the youth team for 4 or 5 years in Limerick, and then I became the senior manager, and an awful lot of the players who went on to play under me were players who had come through the youth side, and they never actually did play in the junior soccer league. And I suppose the idea of having these academy sides, that Treaty have the 15s and the 17s and the 19s, and particularly the younger you go, the 14s as well, that these lads will be kind of indoctrined, if you like, into senior soccer from a young age and are around guys who are playing senior football, and they won't have, if you like, broke out into junior football to come back. And I suppose where Treaty were at the start of the season, such short notice in terms of signing a squad, it's obvious that they would have gone and had a look around the junior circles and known, who were the good players. And the fact that there was no senior team for a year or two, that's where they were. But I think as the years go on, you'll probably see fewer and fewer players, breaking into the local senior team through the door, if you like, of junior football, and you'll have more and more coming directly through the underage system within the club.
Yeah, certainly hope that will be the norm in the future, Noel, and obviously that is the aim. You were obviously manager of Limerick, Noel, and you would have had to deal with a similar situation in that, particularly one instance that springs to mind with me is Brian Donlan, for instance, who was juggling work and playing among the rest of the lads. That's just one example at the time that were juggling, and it might have been quite hard. Some guys stepped away from it for a while. There was a few that, Paul Finucane stepped away for a while as well and came back for you too, due to other commitments. Did you find, and this is just maybe looking at it from the point of view of will Ed McCarthy maybe come back, like Tommy said, maybe in the future to League One? Did you find that those lads maybe struggled once they'd taken time out of Electricity League when they came back, or what's your view on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's easy. Like it's not a great time to be stepping out for Ed McCarthy. I think you certainly need a couple of seasons in. Players get better, and they get more accustomed to it physically, the training, the lifestyle, if you like. To step out of that, I don't think the standards are as high in junior football. A lot of guys are there on their ability. They may well not have to look after themselves. They might be out for an hour or two on a Saturday night or maybe longer, still able to turn up on a Sunday morning and give a performance, an adequate one, if you like. And that's not how it works in senior football. And, you'd like to think some of the Treaty lads as well, and we've kind of been mentioning it, and Ed McCarthy might have been one. I'm not saying that there'd be a host of clubs in looking for him. But, in a couple of years, after establishing himself in the first division, and playing really well with Treaty, it was possible that maybe one of the Premier sides, would have come looking and maybe offered him a full-time contract in Ireland, the likes of Bohemians or someone like that. And, you wouldn't really, be disappointed to see that. You'd actually be happy to see that the fact that the model was working, and if guys are good enough to play at a higher level, no more than when they come to Treaty, that they can move to the next level as well. But, it's hard to see a guy coming back and being better than he was, and there'll be some bad habits to be picked up, and it's hard to break them, particularly at that age. So I think, as I said, as the years go on, there'll probably be less and less coming through the junior football ranks, and they'll be coming in maybe at a younger age, or maybe coming from other League of Ireland clubs, underage ones, to get a chance to play senior football, be it maybe from the Cork or the Cork under-19s or the Galway under-19s, with a Limerick kind of a link, that they'll come here maybe to get experience of playing senior football.
Yeah, and given your own experience and many experience of other Limerick managers, I think that's probably what needs to happen at this stage, Noel, to be honest with you. Just to move on now from that situation, we move on to the Shelbourne game for Treaty on Friday evening. It's a very tough time to go to Talca at any time, Noel, but you're going there now with Shelbourne, knowing that if they win, they're going to be league champions. It's going to be a huge night in Talca Park. They're expecting almost a sellout, from what I believe. Shelbourne are, so they're really excited. It couldn't be a tougher time really for Treaty to go. But look, the other side of it is maybe Shelbourne might have one eye off the ball, and if Treaty win, they know that they're absolutely guaranteed, no questions asked, a playoff place as well.
Yeah, and I think that, without it being said in the dressing room or training, whatever, I think they are guaranteed a playoff place, because even if Treaty don't pick up a point between now and the end of the season, I can't see any of the two teams behind them, going 4 wins out of 4. So, and that might relax Treaty as well and say, it certainly is a game now where they can really have a cut. And I know we've said it once or twice, but there's no getting away from it now that, they could really have a go and just see what they're made of. And maybe they need to think about that if they're behind if they get to the playoff final, for example, it's 2 legs and they're behind from the first leg, and they have to go and win a game, there's no better chance of rehearsal than maybe this game on Friday night. I do think that Shelbourne will be a real handful as well. I think they'll be determined to win this title at home, and I think obviously they're going to win it anyway. So it isn't that they're under massive pressure to win on Friday night. It's more of a desire to do it and put on a show for their fans. And the way that they're playing at the moment, and as I've said it before, they're littered with goals. They're not really dependent on one guy or two guys to score. They seem to have to score from anywhere. I'll be surprised if Treaty get anything out of this game. But it would be nice to see them having a real go. The shackles should be off a little bit with both teams, and it could be a really, really good game.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of makings of a good game. With, as you said, hopefully the shackles of both teams being let off. Although how many times have we said that in the past and they end up being 0-0 draws with very little happening? But we take that result as well, Noel, realistically. Just a word on Shelbourne, I suppose. As I said last week, Noel, you were adamant that Shelbourne would be too strong for this league. That has turned out to be the case all season. There was never really much doubt from maybe the 5th or 6th game on, really, that Shelbourne probably would go on and win the league. They've been very consistent, great attacking threat, solid enough at the back, good goalkeepers at this level. Do you think we'll say that they've learned now from their first sojourn into Premier football? Do you think that this time around they will be more equipped for the Premier Division?
Yeah, well, you'd like to think so. And I think the experience and going back again so quickly will certainly stand to them. I think they probably have better characters around the place than they had. I thought some of the characters they had in the dressing room last year, particularly towards the end of the season when things started to go wrong, kind of their demise came a lot faster maybe than if they had a better group around the place. And you're looking at the two teams that went up. I mean, you saw that Longford went up via the playoff, and it's been a really, really difficult season for them. You look at Dundalk trying to get out of the playoff place tonight, which they possibly will in the next couple of weeks. And while Drogheda, have done very well this season, and I've said it here a few times, I'm not going to be surprised if they end up in the playoff place. So it just shows you the gulf in class when you go up. I'm sure there will be money for Shelbourne, and they might be able to bring in a few more players and those players in, because I think I've said it once or twice at times this season, I've been quite disappointed with Shelbourne at times, and they haven't looked to me like a team that are going to do great next year in the Premier League. But I'm sure they will bring in a few more in, but certainly a big gulf in class, if you like, between the Premier and the First, and it's not that easy to bridge it. There's obviously one way is to throw a lot of money at it. I'm sure Shelbourne, as they've done before, will certainly get an increase in budget, and it may be enough for them to stay away from the bottom 2 or 3. But you see, to try and break into that top 4 or 5 with the likes of Shamrock Rovers and Pats and Sligo and Bows and Derry now, they're going to be very strong next year as well. Survival will be the name of the game for Shelbourne next year. I've no doubt.
Yeah, it certainly will be the case. And at the moment, Noel, on the Shelbourne panel, you actually have 2 former Limerick FC goalkeepers. Brendan Clark is the man between the sticks with Jack Brady, deputising for him a few times, but mostly on the bench. Jack Brady might be quite disappointed in some ways, Noel, with his time with Shelbourne, because, he went in after being playing on a Limerick team which was very low confidence, but he was very good in that team. I mean, they would have lost some games 8 or 9-0, especially towards the end of the season, if it wasn't for him. The one interesting thing, you had Colin McCabe was with Jack, 50-50 last year going for the position. Then Colin McCabe went to Drogheda, so Jack Brady probably would have assumed he was going to be number 1, particularly in the First Division, where he probably feels he had proved himself to be more than adequate. And then you bring in Brendan Clark to Shelbourne. I thought it was a strange move at the time. They'll, justify it by the fact that Brendan now is on a First Division winning team. But I suppose for his own career, it looks like Jack Brady, probably needs to get a move from Shelbourne.
Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be a few takers as well. Maybe if not in the Premier, there'll certainly be some of the First Division sides will look for him. They seem to be becoming a more scarce commodity as time goes on, good keepers. And, you have the likes of maybe Longford back down or whoever, and, he might fancy some first team football. So I'm sure he will get a few offers, and he'll certainly get one from Shelbourne as well to stay. And it depends whether he wants to be a number 2 or whether he wants to play. That'll be a decision he'll have to make.
Yeah, certainly. And I suppose on the team news, for Treaty, Noel, we're probably not going to be expecting wholesale changes by any stretch of the imagination. Two changes we probably will expect will be Sean McSweeney back into the starting 11 and Mark Ludden back into the starting 11.
Yeah, certainly Mark Loudon in as well. Like, as far as I know, they were kind of managing Sean McSweeney. I thought he made a great impact when he came on. Himself and Conor Melody, I thought Conor Melody did very well too, kind of lit up the place, and they could have snuck it in the end as well. Remember, Sean McSweeney had a good chance from a header, and he scored some really good headers this season. But whether, I'm sure, injury permitting, if he's fit to play, you'd certainly like to see him play. And while Clyde O'Connell did quite well, I thought overall, to be thrown in a left full, which is a very specialised position, and he hadn't played there all year, I'm sure that Mark London will come straight into the team, and they'll certainly need him on Friday night.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose for this part of the show, Noel, we normally have yourself and Jason pinging off each other in first division predictions. So I'll probably just have more of a discussion tonight as well as a prediction from yourself on the games. The first one is quite an interesting one, because even though I've been banging on about Treaty trying to keep a gap on that loan, it's Brady that would be a lot more worried than Treaty, or would have been coming into last week at least, up until now. Probably slightly disappointed with Bray in terms of, I thought they'd be slightly higher up in the table. They host Cork City Friday night, and that's certainly a game that Gary Cronin will be fearful of, you'd imagine.
Yeah, I think so. And I saw a good bit of their match on Saturday night. It's an interesting game against
Cove.
Cove. They went to goal up, and they looked to be cruising. And Cove brought on a substitute. I can't remember the chap's name, but he was with Waterford and broke his leg in pre-season. And with his first touch, he was taken down for a penalty, and Bray had a man sent off. And next thing was 1-1, and Bray were down to 10 men. Now, in fairness to them, they scored soon after to regain the lead. But from the centre off, Cove actually scored directly. Some guy had a shot from the kickoff, and it went over the keeper's head and into the net. But the referee disallowed the goal because he hadn't blown for the kickoff. So they managed to hang on. I think it was a really, really big win for them, in fairness, and a very, very important win as well. It's really, really hard to call this. You're just wondering what kind of form that Cork will be in. It's obviously an important game for Bray as well, and I think to me it looks like a draw. Two kind of even teams, in fairness, two teams that have, really will be disappointed overall with how they've done this year. Although Bray, if they get to the playoffs and win a match, then and get to that playoff final, it'll be a great season. So it's just the way the game goes, but it looks to me like a draw, that game.
Yeah, and that brings us on to Athlone and Kevin Teely, Noel. When Paul Doolan was introduced as manager of Athlone, we all thought maybe there was going to be a bounce. That hasn't really worked out to be the case, not consistently anyway. There has been flashes of a win here or there, but nowhere near the consistency they needed. I know Jason probably maybe disagrees a bit with himself. I don't realistically think Athlone are as strong as Jason was saying, although people will say on paper that they are, but in seeing them in pre-season and then throughout the season, I don't think they were. This game against Kevin Teely, this probably could go either way now, because you were talking about the wind going out of the sails of Cork. Realistically, Athlone will be thinking the same thing. I know that won't be said in the media, but you'd imagine that will be the case, like as last week was almost last chance saloon, especially with Treaty and Bray picking up points. Yeah,
and then you're thinking that Paul Doolan has got a chance to come back in and manage it and with the great start he had, beating Galway, things look like it was a great decision, and they've kind of slipped with a couple of defeats. I suppose the one thing they're not doing that they were doing up to Paul Doolan's arrival is conceding 3, 4 and 5 goals in matches. They've certainly cut that. They'll really be devastated by the defeat last week. But if you remember, they only drew 4-4 with Wexford in the previous fixture as well. And I think that he has enough about him, Paul Doolan, to rally them back up. And they're probably playing for their futures as well. And he'd be telling them that. There's obviously a few bob available in that loan. It's not in every first division club. And I'm sure players will be playing for a contract for next season. And because of Kevin Teely's poor form and the fact that Athlone lost last week and they'll be eager to bounce back, I nearly expect Athlone to get a win there.
Yeah, and then you have Cove and Galway. I know you said you watched Cove last week. Noel, I suppose in one way it summed up Cove Ramblers' season to actually play against 10 men. You get a penalty, they're down to 10 men, then Bray score. and Cove then obviously score, and it's ruled out. It summed up everything that's happened for Cove, or not happened, should I say, in some respects for Cove. They now host the Galway side, who, it's amazing really, because I've seen Galway a few times. I've been far from impressed with them, but let's be honest, was I ever going to be impressed by the way John Coughlin would set up his side? You know, it's very diligent. They get the results. You know, that's the way it goes. They're 10 points off Shelbourne, but they're the best of the rest right now. And they will be very difficult match for particularly any of the other first division teams in the playoff. They will probably be, Noel, you'd imagine, the favourites to get out of the first division section of the playoff.
I think there's no doubt about that, and you'd expect them to go to Cove and win. There'll be no complacency or no lack of effort or no switch off, as you said, with John Coughlin's team. The fact they got 4 goals last week as well, you know, because we've been talking about their lack of goals. Cove will really feel the pressure now with Wexford as well winning. I think that's down to 4 points between, you know, 10th and 9th. And there's nothing worse than looking over your shoulder with a team getting a few wins behind you. And I couldn't see anything else, only a Galway win there.
Yeah, that brings us on nicely actually to the last game we'll be talking about, which is Wexford and the UCD. We've been speaking about it for the last few weeks, how there has been improvement in Wexford. And none other so that when you see they went to Athlone and won, they should have beaten Treaty when they played Treaty at the Markets Field as well. They have been steadily improving, but you'd imagine there'll be a bit of excitement there. Now, obviously, as you said, they'll be trying to catch Cove in the short term, but there'll probably be a bit of excitement into what can we do next year with Wexford. Can we improve and get up the table? So they'll have that bit of bounce as well. They're coming up against a fairly formidable attacking outfit when they want to be in UCD, who will be hurting massively from the manner of their defeat against Galway. And again, they'll be looking to how they can rectify things for the playoffs as well.
Yeah, I think they will. And listen, it could be a great game. Now you were talking about a game with goals. You could certainly see goals in that game. And if the two of them go for it, I think, you know, it could be a high-scoring game. And again, just a bit more firepower and a bit more class and quality with UCD. The fact that they are looking for, you know, for a win to stay in the playoffs or stay as high as they can in the league, you certainly see